Episode 3 today, or are we just dodging and doing?
Who knows? Who knows if we'll get to it? It's a mystery.
This should be a fun introduction.
Yeah,
All right. Okay. So you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Here we go then. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Pausing for the convenience of the editor. Hello and welcome to this very special episode of the Silmarillion Film Project. As many of you are aware, we're in the middle of a fundraising period. We're doing our annual Signum University Webathon, and as such, we're bringing you this very special episode, mystery episode of the Silmarillion Film Project. We have no idea what we're going to discuss. Hypothetically, it's supposed to be season 3, episode 3, but that's what last episode was supposed to be too, and you guys saw how that went. So
Exactly.
So
You never know.
Yeah, this could go any direction. We might even just hijack the whole episode and talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Who knows? And anyway, if you listen to the show at all, as you know, I'm your co-host Dave Kale, and with me as always is the Tolkien professor Corey Olson. Sadly, second week in a row, or second podcast in a row, we're missing Trish Lambert again, which is very sad, but we're sure we'll have her back next time.
That's what we hear. Absolutely. Okay.
And hopefully she should be on tomorrow's.
Yes. Yes.
It's always dangerous saying tomorrow on a podcast because people are always listening to things after not live. But
that's right.
On the next, we have another special Silmarillion Film Project episode coming up, Corey. But I assume you'll tell us about that.
I am.
In addition to all the other Webathon things right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's, of course, the big announcement we need to talk about right away at the beginning is that tomorrow, October 14th, is the Signum University Webathon, our annual Webathon, which is the culmination of our fundraising campaign. And I'm really excited for our Webathon this year. We have a whole bunch of things going on. I'm going to be broadcasting for at least 13, 14 hours, I'm sure. It's going to be a long, awesome, fun day. During the Webathon, there are several major sessions that I'm gonna be doing. Several sort of three really big, or that is 3 longer sessions, and then a whole bunch of really fun shorter sessions. Actually, okay, 4 long sessions, and then a whole bunch of shorter ones. So the long sessions that I'm doing at the very beginning of the Webathon, which starts at noon Eastern time, and the best place to join us, by the way, for the Webathon is on our Twitch channel. We do have a link for a NetMoot for our webinar session, but it's going to be easier to accommodate more people through our Twitch channel. So we encourage you to use Twitch and Discord if you're comfortable with using Discord. But
give us a few years, and we'll be using those new portable Oculus Rift glasses, and we'll all be sitting in a virtual reality classroom.
Hey, that's right. We're on the way. Okay, so at the very beginning, the first session I'm going to be doing is a special session. This is designed to be a supplement to the Exploring the Lord of the Rings class, and we're going to be talking about Tom Bombadil, because we've been doing Tom Bombadil for a couple months now in Exploring the Lord of the Rings, and I keep referring to the poems, to the old poem from which he took the character of Tom Bombadil. So I'm going to do a special session on the Tom Bombadil poems. We're going to look at the early 1930s Tom Bombadil, the Adventures of Tom Bombadil poem that Tolkien wrote. So we'll look at Tom Bombadil before he gets incorporated into the Fellowship of the Ring, and then we're going to look at the sequel poem that Tolkien wrote in the 60s called Bombadil Goes Boating, which is a sequel not only in the fact that he wrote it after he wrote The Lord of the Rings, but of course it takes place actually after the chronology of The Lord of the Rings as well. So we'll get like the original Tom Bombadil, and then we'll get a later sequel Tom Bombadil, and sort of see how the character changes in Tolkien's treatment of it. And of course it's both of them are the poetic treatments. So we're gonna have a special, really cool Tom Bombadil session at the beginning, starting at noon. Then my second big session is going to start at 4:20, and that's going to be my my special Mythgard Academy section on Star Trek, my one-shot Star Trek class, where we're going to be. I've been doing nominations and voting all week on my social media, which I just announced the results of last night. By far, the top vote getter was the Darmok episode from The Next Generation, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to discussing that. I've actually been like walking around muttering, Darmok and Gelada Tanagra to myself for like the last 2 days. So that's going to be that's going to be great. I'm also going to do an episode from the original series, The City on the Edge of Tomorrow. That was the biggest vote getter among the original series, and I really wanted to do more than one. So we're gonna do a Next Generation and an original series. Not a Deep Space Nine, Dave, sadly.
Conspicuously absent.
It just sort of shows that I wasn't following my heart, that I was trying to honor the voting system that I set up, because certainly Deep Space Nine is without question my favorite of all of the Star Trek series, and I absolutely would have wanted to do. I actually think if I had to choose a single Deep Space Nine episode to do, just from my own suggestion, it would have been Far Beyond the Stars, the one with the science fiction magazine.
Yeah.
Right. That really fun episode with all of them not in makeup, and so and it took me a fully 15 minutes to figure out who was who.
Right. Yeah, that's true. There's some of the actors you're like, hey, who is that?
Right, who is that dude? Oh, it's Quark. Right, okay, got it. Yeah, actually, it's funny because I usually am watching Star Trek on Netflix on my phone while I'm like doing chores and stuff around the house. So as long as I wasn't watching the screen, I could easily tell who was who because I recognize their voices. But but when I'm actually looking at it, I was like, wait, who is that? Oh, it's Odo. Okay, right. Anyway, yeah. But yeah, it's that's the episode I would have really been interested to talk about from Deep Space Nine. But that's fine. I decided not to hijack it. So we're gonna do the top vote getters, which were the one from the original series, the City on the Edge of Tomorrow, and the Darmok, of course, which was the landslide #1 winner, and I think that's totally appropriate.
An admirable exercise of restraint for a person in a position of power.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try.
You're a model that everyone should be following these days, and sadly, it appears no one is.
Well, what can one expect, really? I'm always surprised when people are surprised by that. But anyway, but that's enough of that. Anyway, so so that's the second session I'm going to be doing is the my Star Trek class. The third session I'm going to be doing will start at 9 p.m. and that is a really important one. That's my my State of the University address, where I'm going to be talking about Signum. I'm going to be talking about what's been going on at Signum. If you've ever been curious about things like, hey, so like I keep hearing there are these other things happening. It's, like most people are invested in one or two of our programs, sort of following along, but maybe you've heard stuff, or I keep, making announcements and you're like, I don't really understand. Or have you ever been confused? Are you like, wait a second, like I thought we were the Mythgard Institute. Like, what is Signum University? What is a Mythgard Institute? How are they connected to each other? How does that work and what's going on? Have you ever been confused about those things? I'm going to be explaining exactly how what Signum is doing. But not only what Signum is doing now, I'm also going to be talking about money. I mean, a question that many of you are sort of too polite to ask, but I want to make sure I answer is, what do we use the money for when people make donations? Like, where does your money go, actually? And why do we need so much of it? Is another question that everyone is too polite to ask, but which I would like to answer. So I'm gonna show you some stuff from our budget and exactly how we spend our money, and just kind of lay that out for you so that you can see. And then after,
I'll just assume you're skimming off the top.
Actually, I kind of think I actually do get the impression that some people think that most of the money we raise goes to like support me, which is not true, actually, as I'll show people. Not that I'm skimming, but that it's actually designed to like, you know, like be my salary or something. I've gotten that impression from hearing from some people.
Well, don't disabuse that. Maybe people will stop giving. Maybe that's what they. Maybe they're doing it because they're like, well, someone has to make sure Corey gets fed.
Right, and I would argue that not giving is not the way to improve the odds of that, actually. But but anyway, I'm gonna lay all that out. I'm gonna explain that, and then I'm gonna talk about where we're headed, because we're in a really, really fun and exciting period of growth for Signum. We're making some really big leaps. Have been already over this past year, and are going to be continuing to do so over the next year. So I'm going to be talking about that, and that's going to be really big and important. So that starts at 9, and then we're going to talk about. Oh, and then I'm going to do a special Lotro stream. I'm going to be taking Wigan to Isengard. So my guardian, who is my highest level character, just did the Battle of Helm's Deep, which I found really fun, though rather anticlimactic at the end. I thought the ending of the Battle of Helm's Deep in the game was super disappointing. But I did get blown up on the wall of Helm's Deep, so that was totally worthwhile. And then we're gonna. But anyway, so I'm gonna move him forward. We're gonna get to Isengard and the Ents attack on Isengard and stuff. And I've never seen that stuff before, so I want to get Wigan as close as I can to the Path of the Dead and get him ready to actually move forward into Gondor soon. So that's what I'm going to be doing at the very end of the day. So the Lotro stream will start at about 10:30 or so p.m. Eastern time. Now.
So let me get this straight. You'll be taking the Hobbit to Isengard?
No, I'm going to be taking... He's not a Hobbit. It would work better if it were, but no. It's like, I'm taking my human guardian to Isengard, which is comparatively lame. Yeah, I know. It's just not that snappy. But
and you're not even going to Isengard.
Yeah, well, I will. I will go to Isengard.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I will go to Isengard. So
the Path of the Dead is way cooler.
The Path of the Dead is cooler, right? And I'm gonna get to the Path of the Dead. That's my hope, is to get up to the Path of the Dead in the stream on Saturday night. So
when you arrive, will you discover that the way is shut?
Yeah, well, who knows, right? It's quite possible that's what's going to happen. I'm actually really interested to see how they handle that. Sort of the Paths of the Dead, like going after Aragorn, right? It's like, did he leave the door open behind him? Like, how does that work? Like the way was shut, but the dude who came through before, left the door cracked, and so I guess you can come through.
Wedge
like
something in the door.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm really curious. I'm really curious to see how they handle that. And it's a fun reminder of the different kind of adaptation demands that the genre places, right? I mean, like thinking through an adaptation as we are in the direction of a TV series, it's a whole different set of parameters, right, than doing an adaptation for video game play, because you have to accommodate different kinds of characters and storylines. So yeah. Anyway, so that's going to be a lot of fun to look at. Now we are also doing our Silmarillion film project spotlight during the Webathon. We're doing a spotlight on a whole bunch of our different programs through Signum and Mythgard, and what we're going to be focusing on in that is really just kind of a general reflection on SilmFilm. We're not going to be doing any sort of particular SilmFilm business in the sense of moving things along, moving our discussions along in concrete ways. We're just going to kind of pause, and several of us, both Nick and Marie from the script team, and Trish and Dave and I, are going to be just sort of reflecting on the project as a whole. I think that there are a lot of people who don't really get it, who don't really understand the Silmarillion film project and what it's about, and more importantly, who don't realize what I think it is. It has been for me a really amazing investment in the story, and I have learned so much about the Silmarillion. There's questions I never asked before, topics I never considered, sort of passages that have really just opened up to me in ways that I never even thought about them before. And that's the kind of thing that I'm really interested to share and to hear from others about the kind of impact that this has had and the way in which this project is really cool. So that's what we're going to be focusing on and talking about during our Silmarillion Film Project Spotlight, which is going to be happening at 7:10, scheduled for 7:10 p.m. as I recall, during the Webathon. So that's going to be fun too. Anyway, all this stuff is happening. Join us on the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/SignumU at noon on Saturday, and we'll be broadcasting for the whole rest of the day. So that is, of course, the big announcement for this week. Now, this is because the Webathon is coming up tomorrow. That means we are coming to the very end of our fundraising campaign. I would like to thank everybody who's already donated. We've gotten many, many donations, and that's been really wonderful. We're still, as I'll be talking about on Saturday in the State of the University address, still not quite at our goal. For the year. So, we definitely could still use help. Remember, I said, this was a long time ago, of course, now in the world of SilmFilm Project. Okay, no, in the world of the SilmFilm Project, it was yesterday, but in the real world, it was 3 weeks ago, which, of course, means as you are accustomed to, I can barely remember that it happened, but I'd said at our previous recording that we were going to do a drawing, a prize drawing for all the people who have donated and sort of dedicated that donation to the SilmFilm Project. So that's going to be for... so what you have to... So there's still going to be time to enter. I'm going to do the drawing officially at the end of our session here today. So if we... If any more donations come in during the course of our session here today, all you have to do, make a donation, go to signumuniversity.org/donate, and then send a quick email to donate@signumu.org. If you've already made a donation and you haven't sort of dedicated it to one of our programs, then go ahead and you can still just send an email to sort of mark that. Again, send it to donate@signumu.org. And at the end of the session, I will do a prize drawing, and we're going to give away some free books. And you can get. I'm going to give away 2 prizes. A second prize and a first prize. Or second prize will be one book. We'll give you a free book of your choice because if there's a Tolkien book that you don't have, be happy to get that for you and put a customized book plate in the front of it for you to commemorate your participation in our fundraiser and your winning of our drawing. So the first prize will be 2 books. So we'll give a double prize to the person who wins the drawing. So as I said, we're gonna do that at the end. Please do consider donating if you haven't yet. We really do rely very heavily on the donations of our listeners, and it's been our philosophy from the very beginning. We've been Dave and I have been doing podcasts like this for a long time now. It's been many years. By the way, Dave, at the Iowa Moot last weekend, I saw Chris Stevens and Laura Burkholz.
I saw the photos.
Yeah, we had a little Silmarillionaire partial reunion out there.
I was excited and jealous.
Yes. That was really fun. It was it's funny because I was talking with them at one point and somebody walked by and recognized their voices. And they were like, "Are you Laura? Laura from the Silmarillion from the Silmarillion seminar?" Yeah,
That's
it was cool,
but not surprising.
No,
I think that one still remains one of the most like impactful podcast series you've done. Like, I still occasionally run into people who are like, "Oh yeah, I listened to the Silmarillion podcast." I'm like, "Wow." Yeah. I think it was like from 8 years ago.
It was, 2010 really was, No, it is. I still get emails. I still get emails from people who, we're like, I just listened to the Silmarillion seminar, and it's totally changed the way I look at the Silmarillion. I mean, I agree. And of course, I agree personally as well. I mean, it was the Silmarillion seminar that really changed my life. I mean, like that, no exaggeration. I mean, Signum University in large part came because of the Silmarillion seminar. So really, all of the stuff that's happening here,
guinea pigs.
essentially, essentially, yeah, that's pretty much how it works. Anyway, so just to invite you, if you've been enjoying the intellectual stimulation and entertainment that we've been able to provide, that we provide over the course of the year, I ask that you would consider making a donation to help to support our work. All right, and as I said, I'll be coming back to that during the course of or at the end of the episode here today to do our final drawing. So, all right. So here's the problem. So today we're supposed to do episode 3. Now, we were supposed to do episode 3 last time, and we ended up spending the whole time continuing to talk about the kinslaying, and I don't apologize for that. That was excellent. I was really glad to continue thinking through the kinslaying and some other issues that came up that we didn't resolve. So this time, we're totally ready to go to season 3, episode 3, except here's this other problem that I had as we were preparing to do that, right? So the problem that I keep having now that the first 2 episodes were no-brainers as far as the content is concerned, right? I mean, we needed to start with the oath of the speeches by Torchlight and the oath of Feanor, followed by the kinslaying. That was pretty open and closed. But there's been a fair bit of debate ever since about how the rest of the season is going to go, and the problem that I keep having in trying to think and plan now, moving forward, episode 3, I kept sort of beating my head against this in trying to prepare for today's episode, was I'm still not feeling really confident about our overall outline and where exactly we're headed. And until I feel more certain about that, I'm going to have a really hard time moving forward with specific plans for episode 3, because I don't really know exactly where we're headed. And like I said, there's never been real, I also feel that I'm kind of at, well, not at cross purposes, but we have not achieved like-mindedness between the executive and the, and our intellectual workers on this. You guys on the discussion boards. I know there's been some disquiet about the proposed outlines that we made before. So I want to kind of go back and revisit this today in order to try to sort of resolve this.
Quiet. How dare they?
Yeah. So we're going to address this today and try to see if we can come to some sort of agreement on exactly how we are going to plan out the rest of the season. And if we can achieve that, then we may indeed get to episode 3 today. But I'm not going to move forward. I'm not going to continue sort of stumbling forward in the dark here. And
if we can't achieve that, then we start firing people.
If we can't achieve that, we'll keep talking about it until we beat everybody else into submission. Is pretty much the plan. So, okay. Nick is wanting to point out, by the way, that it's not him this time that's causing trouble. In fact, so let's see. So Hakan, I see that you're here today, and that's great. I really appreciate all the work that you have done on the outlines, which is great. And I want to address this is Hakan's proposed outline, and I want to kind of talk this through a little bit. Doing a little comparing and contrasting to the overall scheme that we had before. Okay, the big issue is time. Okay. That the way that we had done the outline essentially makes the second battle of Beleriand happen before the first battle of Beleriand. That didn't happen by accident. I proposed that on purpose, and I still actually support that. Let's look at the first half or so of this outline of Hakon's proposed outline. Episodes 1 and 2, right, are relatively well, okay, no, 1 is. Now, we've already kind of moved past this in a sense, in that he wanted to push the kinslaying to episode 3. I have troubles with that. I want to stay with the Noldor. I think I'm comfortable with how we did episode 1 and 2, but anyway, okay. Let me just read through this here. So the proposal was episode 1, the oath, setting up the frame situation. Episode 2, reactions to the oath, choices among those who didn't take the oath, Fëanor and Nordinel visit to Angband, leading in 3 to the Noldor feel the need for ships and the kinslaying. But then also in episode 3, looking at young Luthien and the appearance of orcs in Beleriand. Episode 4, alliance with the dwarves, Menegroth, Uinen, Storm. The Green Elves come in episode 5 with the Ents, and the Curse of Mandos happens, and then Finarfin returns and is forgiven. The planning of the Moon and Sun in episode 6. The abandonment of Fingolfin in episode 7, and the attack on Beleriand. The burning of the ships, and the beginning of the Helcaraxa passage in episode 8. The attack on the Havens and the death of Denethor in episode 9, the death of Fëanor, and more on the Helcaraxa. So we get the second battle happening there with Fëanor's arrival in episode 10. Okay. Oh, right. So I see, Marie. This is an older version. That's fine. Okay. So yeah, we've moved past that with episode 1 and 2. All right. This is the one that I found to kind of slap up here. Apologize if this isn't your most recent version, Hakon. The big.
So we're discussing a straw man. Even better.
Even better, right? Exactly. Exactly.
This seems like pretty typical executive behavior right here.
It does. It does. I agree. It's kind of fun. We're
complaining about an outline that is in fact outdated and not even relevant.
Well, it's still, a lot of it is still relevant. Here's the big issue. The big issue is time, right? In the published Silmarillion, we follow the story of the Noldor through the darkening of Valinor, and then when the scene is ready to shift over to Beleriand, Tolkien has that chapter where he goes backwards in time, right? And we get this Meanwhile in Beleriand chapter of the Silmarillion, which is really like in the space of just a couple pages, does like, meanwhile, here's what's been happening for the last few millennia in Beleriand, right? And it's of course, all of the Silmarillion is fairly, is done from a fairly high altitude. Most of the Silmarillion is written in what in the History of Middle-earth series I've called the plot summary genre. So we get, see, Marie, the reason I didn't post the most recent outline is the only one I had was the really detailed one that's like 50 pages long, and it's not I can't put it on a slide. But anyway, so yeah, that's exactly why I did that. Okay, so I don't think we can do that. We can't do that. We have to reconcile ourselves to not shifting back by millennia and doing, we've just seen Morgoth in Beleriand at the end of season 2, right? We got him over there. We can't shift back and be like, and now everything that's happening there is actually before Morgoth comes back. I think we've seen him come back. We've even seen his lieutenants responding to his return in that last scene, right? Because we got him being rescued by Gothmog and the Balrogs from Ungoliant, right? So there's absolutely no way that we can return to the pre-Morgoth world of Beleriand, I think, unless we're gonna do some kind of like on-screen caption, like hundreds of years earlier, this happened, and I think that's I don't think that's going to work, and I'm very strongly against that. Now I realize that the consequence of that is that we're going to have to change the time sequence. We're going to have to join the story in Beleriand at a late point, and I know that by the time Morgoth returns to Beleriand, a lot of the things on the Beleriand side have already happened, right? But that's exactly I think that the only way we're going to be able to help people make sense of this, to be able to kind of wrap their minds around the story, is to tell it as a continuous narrative. And I know that, Hakan, I know you're resistant to this. I know that a bunch of people are resistant to this, but I just cannot see how it will work to expect us to be able to leap backwards like that at this point, especially the ways in which, like, if we're going to be going back and forth at all with the Noldor, then like we're jumping forwards and backwards, and the fact that the two timelines are different but kind of getting closer until they sort of come together. It's one thing to have the two narratives coming together, but to have the time frame different, I cannot imagine how we can possibly ask anybody who doesn't know the text really well to really follow that at all. And that's the whole point. The whole point of one of the whole points of doing this is to be able to make this story accessible for people who don't know, that for this to be a way to kind of open the Silmarillion story to them. And it's okay if it's different, especially since we're not even talking about a major difference in some ways. There are challenges to it. There are definitely challenges to it, because we have to greatly compress the storyline in Beleriand. The way that, one way that we can do that is sort of slightly, or at least implicitly, kind of extend the Noldor narrative. That is by leaving it behind for a while, right? And see, Nick, this is exactly my one of the reasons why I have not wanted to have the two narratives integrated, right? Nick, I think if I'm remembering correctly, one of the objections that you've had from the beginning is that you haven't wanted to like do the Noldor, leave the Noldor behind, then do Beleriand, and then come back to the Noldor afterwards. I really want to. I really want to make it work as a continuous narrative, and the only way I think that we can do that, I find it will work better if we try to jump back and forth, we're going to make it even more compressed. We're going to make it even harder to understand. So anyway, Dave, what are your thoughts about the chronology?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of following the book structure and sort of having we keep making the meanwhile Beleriand joke, and even that's like jumping back and forth between the two storylines is already kind of is tricky.
It is tricky.
It's doable. It works okay on Game of Thrones. Like, it's not the worst, but doing it with time also would be really disorienting.
Exactly.
I mean, just think of like how confusing it is for people reading Song of Ice and Fire books when they go from Feast for Crows to Dance with Dragons, and they you get like halfway through that book before you realize that those two books are contemporaneous and occurring in parallel. you know, that they're not books written in sequence.
Right.
But then there's this like, you know, but that's for the first 2/3 of that, of Dance with Dragons. When you get to the last third, where they start reintroducing, you know, point of view chapters from characters that were not previously in Dance with Dragons, and then you realize like, oh no, now we've caught up, and now we're moving forward in time again. Like, yeah, I think we should avoid that. If we're assuming that if we're thinking that the audience for this show is not a bunch of people who've read the books 30 times, and will be following along closely, then I think we would want to avoid doing something that's going to really confuse people.
Yes, I agree. Now, my objection, I'm not trying to oversimplify things here too much. My objection isn't the difficulty of jumping around from one plot to another, right? I mean, the Lord of the Rings does that very well. The Lord of the Rings films did that fine. You know, there's no problem with, but of course, the understanding, the assumption in like the way that Jackson did it in the films, I thought that element of the Lord of the Rings films worked very well. And of course, the major change that Jackson made in his presentation there from the presentation in the books, again, thinking of the chronology, right, is that he spliced them in more closely, whereas Tolkien does, you know, like all of book 4, right, with Frodo, and, you know, so we get book, you know, once the Fellowship breaks at the end of book 2, in the beginning of book 3, at the beginning of the Two Towers, right, we follow the rest of the company, and then when we start to book 4, we go backwards in time to the beginning, you know, to the, like, soon after the breaking of the Fellowship, and continue past the time frame of the end of you know, at the you know, at the ruins of Isengard and immediately afterwards, which is where Tolkien ends book 3. It goes past that, right, and begins to move up towards the stuff that's not going to happen until book 5, right? Book 5 goes back a little bit in time and then pushes it forward. So they're sort of overlapping and continuing to go. That's how the book works, and that's fine. Like, that works really well in the book. But I think there's a really good reason that Peter Jackson didn't do it that way. That instead of doing it that way, he was jumping back and forth. But every time there's a jump, there is the implicit assumption that the things that are happening, that he's showing, are happening at about the same time. Nick, exactly. That kind of motion, the motion that Tolkien does, that long stretch of narrative, then moving back in time to another long stretch of narrative. I agree, Nick. I don't think that works very well on screen at all. You have to give cues. The assumption, you know, this is there's something to be said for, you know, in this regard anyway. I think back to, you know, even Aristotle, you know, and the unity of time and stuff on stage. You know, the idea that people watching a play aren't, you know, or watching a play or a drama are not capable of doing time jumps is kind of silly. The way in which, you know, the classical unities as they were talked about in like the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries is kind of stupid. But of course people are capable of following that and imagining that. However, there is something to be said for the fact that when somebody is sitting there and watching a drama, you know, which is sort of in real time in front of them, right, whether it's on a screen or something, there is the assumption that time is proceeding linearly, right? And that's why there's when they don't do that, when a flashback is given, there's a signal for that. Like, you have to signal this is a flashback. But even when you're doing a flashback, the assumption is at some point we're going to flash back forward and catch up to the narrative where we paused it, right? And of course, even with, I'm really happy with the first 2 episodes that we've planned, but remember, we're not even starting episode 3 clean. We ended episode 2 with the sailing of the ships out of the gate, and that moment which I love of, you know, Fëanor on the deck of the ship and Fingolfin on the arch above, and them, you know, exchanging this glance as Fëanor passes out of the gates. In other words, we were saving the storm, Uinen's storm, for the beginning of episode 3. We were going to start with that. We can't possibly have the first 10 minutes of episode 3 happen after the kinslaying, and then a quarter of the way through episode 3 or a fifth of the way or whatever be like, now going back several centuries, right? I mean, again, we can say that, but I think I really don't like that. I'm not a big fan of that progression at all. I really think that we should maintain our momentum. Well, let's just think about this more for a little second here. What are the consequences? What are the consequences? Apart from having to change stuff, right? Concerning which, like adaptation, you do that, right? What has to happen in order for us to present a continuous narrative, to be jumping from the storm of Uinen, after the kinslaying, over to Middle-earth and what's going on in Middle-earth, right? In order to shift the scene to Beleriand contemporaneously and still tell the story that we want to tell, what do we have to do? What kinds of challenges would we have to overcome in order to do that? Right? Okay, good. So Marie says, one thing is dwarves will arrive and Menegroth will be built after Morgoth's return, which makes that all very reactionary. Yes. And Marie, I'm fine with that. That actually seems to me like kind of a good thing, actually. We do lose those years in which orcs are running around and destroying things in Beleriand, and, we lose the fact that when the Noldor come, it looks like, things look like they were going straight downhill in Beleriand, and then the Noldor come and deliver them. Except, I don't think we actually have to lose that at all. I think we can still have the arrival of the Noldor seem like a deliverance, essentially. I think we can be fine with that. No, Hakan, why would we have to skip moving to Menegroth? I don't understand. I don't understand why we can't do that. Why can't we do that at the beginning? Why can't that be near the start? What before that do we have to do, even? The move to Menegroth. Again, obviously, it involves a compression of the book timeline. Yeah, it does. But I don't see what we lose necessarily by doing that. Marie, yes, episode 3 still can be Days of Peace. It absolutely can, because Morgoth has just returned, right? And he's pretty far away, and none of the, nothing has happened down there yet. So we absolutely can begin episode 3 with Days of Peace. The beginning of episode 3 can show us sort of a glimpse of how things have been peacefully in the past, right? It does mean that Menegroth has to, if we want to show Menegroth being built, maybe we can do, but I don't see why we have to make Menegroth have happened before. The choice there, it seems to me, is, do we want Menegroth to be peaceful or not peaceful, right? That is to say, do we want Menegroth do we want to present Menegroth as the thing that was built as like this sort of during the time of peace, right? During Hakan, I know we lose the Tolkien timeline. I know it. But I think we are going to derail things if we just try to be slavish to Tolkien's timeline. I think that the question is not, or rather, and this I think is a super important point when thinking about adaptation. If the first thing we're doing is always trying to preserve exactly how things are presented in the book, that's how a lot of bad adaptations come about. We need to instead be thinking bigger picture, not leaving Tolkien's story behind, but rather how can we be true to the story that Tolkien is saying in a way that fits well the frame in which we're doing it, the medium in which we're doing it, right? And I do think that this kind of continuous narrative is something that's going to be really important. It's something that is going to make this much, much easier to handle. It's going to make this seem like a more consistent story all the way through. And so
how the foot's the shoe's on the other foot now, right? I feel like, well, no, it's not true. We've never been we were okay, maybe me. We were never the kind that complained horribly about Peter Jackson changing things from the book. I think we just complained about the things that we thought really were dumb or didn't work. But it is sort of interesting being in the position of defending, like, having to make lots of big changes to Tolkien's story. Well, not the story so much, but like to the piece of art that Tolkien created in order to adapt it to a different medium.
Well, that's it.
I think that's very funny and ironic. We're having this conversation and we're on the side of like, oh no, we need to make these changes.
Yeah. Well, no, exactly. I mean, here's how, and honestly, this is, I think this is in a sense where I differ, or at least it seems like I differ from a lot of the film adaptation stuff. I'm not saying like, hey, let's go off on our own and tell our own different story. What I'm saying is this is the question that we need to, like, instead of saying, let's like map out the events in the order in which, Tolkien told them, in the timeline in which Tolkien presented, and figure out a way to make that work in our story. Instead of thinking about it like that, what I want to do is say, let's look at the story that Tolkien told. What are the essential elements of that story? What is Tolkien conveying in that story that he's telling? And then how can we convey that in our story, right? How can we capture not the details, right, but the essence of the story that Tolkien is telling? Yeah. Now, I agree, but both Nick and Marie are cautioning about, small changes that can have large repercussions later on. Absolutely. We really do need to count the cost here. We need to think about these changes that we're making, and absolutely we need to be thinking ahead. What are going to be the consequences of these things? That's not a reason not to do it. It just talks about how it needs to be done, right? And so, Nick, you're right. This is a repercussion of abandoning the Beleriand plot earlier. I can't see how we could have done that differently, really, since plot-wise, I mean, what happens in Valinor, right? The Noldor plot in Valinor is the dominant storyline, not only the dominant storyline in that epoch, right? I mean, to give equal time to Beleriand throughout the second half of season 2 would have been ridiculous, right? And frankly, I still agree with the decision that we made there, even to check in on Beleriand every once in a while would have been a distraction, especially since not all that much was happening. And if we were going to depict something like, look at the things that would have been happening, right? The encounter with the dwarves, the building of Menegroth, right? The first wars with the orcs before Morgoth returns. If we were going to do justice to those things, right? How could we have done justice to those things without taking up like half of the second half of season 2? Right? It would have taken a lot of time for us to be able to do those. It would have been something close, way closer than I would have been comfortable with, to equal billing to those things and the unrest of the Noldor in Valinor and the forging of the Silmarils and the darkening, right? Even Tolkien's own narrative shows that all that stuff that happened in Beleriand is secondary. You can tell it's secondary because he spends several chapters doing the Valinor stuff, and then he's like, okay, here's a couple pages worth of like summary of what happened back in Beleriand, right? It's important for us to know that background so that when the scene does shift to Beleriand, as it does after the Darkening and the rebellion of the Noldor, we need to know the context, right? But it's really just given us, for it's really just given us for context. I am ready to defend that for however long, right? It's just, that would not have made any sense to me at all. So leaving Beleriand behind and focusing on the Noldor in Valinor seems to me absolutely inevitable. If we don't put that story in the spotlight, the story of how the Noldor fell, the story of how the Silmarils were made, the story of Morgoth's relationship with them, and you know, the fall of Feanor and the fall of Morgoth and the Darkening, that's where the focus really needed to be. Which means when we come back to Beleriand, we have this choice. We either have to go back in time or we have to move forward, and I think that we can do that. So Haakon, I don't think so. Okay, now so this is where I'm disagreeing with you, Haakon. Haakon is arguing that if we do this, you're having done this, right? If we're gonna make the timeline contemporary, that when we return to Beleriand in episode 3, we have to make a whole bunch of these things already have happened. We have to just sort of join it midstream and have Menegroth already built, the dwarves, them already in relationship with the dwarves, and the green elves already in situ there in Osiriand. Why? Why do we have to do that? Yes, it's true that the only alternative is to accelerate that timeline, right? To have them meet the dwarves later chronologically than they do in the book, to have the green elves arrive later chronologically than they do, to have the first battles between them, between all of those guys and the orcs happen later than it does in the books. Yes, but that's fine. Why can't we do that? What's to stop us doing that? Especially since we have a pretty good stretch of episodes in front of us before we get back to the Noldor, right? We have at least 3 and maybe 4 episodes. One of the landmarks that I recall us agreeing on was episode 8 for the burning the ships, right? Which means the arrival of the Noldor in Beleriand, right? If that's not going to happen until episode 8, we have most of episode 3, and then at least 4, 5, and 6. Episode 7, you know, we probably return to the Noldor in episode 7 because we need to get the Curse of Feanor in, right? You know, we need to get the Curse of the Noldor, the Doom of Mandos. And as I recall, we were going to do that in episode 7. So yeah, Nick, I agree. I don't think we lose anything thematically with the accelerated timeline. The only real challenge that I see in accelerating the timeline like that is the actual leaving time for the actual construction of Menegroth. But I think there are a couple ways that we can get around that. One is, Tony was suggesting before that we could have Menegroth already built or already building, because of like Melion's foresight, right? Melion could have, and that could be explained. Even that, yeah, that's something that we could possibly do. I don't know, because I don't know that Menegroth needs to be a finished product before they move in part. If they're moving into Menegroth is a reaction to the arising of evil in Beleriand, the stirring of evil, and the aggression of the orcs, especially, under the direction, ultimately under the direction of Morgoth, but under the captaincy of Sauron or of Bulldog or whoever. The idea that the elves are going to seek shelter, that their first impulse is to move to a place of strength underground, that I think is fine, right? They can have their place underground, and they're going to be living there for a long time. So they can be like finishing it and beautifying it for a long time. Heck, we can have, this series of pre-existing caves that they move into and have the process of them transforming this, subterranean shelter that they have taken for defensive purposes and transforming that into Menegroth. That can take as long as we need it to take, essentially. Marie says they could not even finish Menegroth until season 4. Absolutely. And Marie, exactly. If Meme lives there, he could easily have started it. So there would be caverns, there would be places for them to be. So I think that's that seems to me to work perfectly fine. So I'm not concerned about the time, because that's one of the great things about Menegroth, right? We're not talking about a structure. We're not talking about like a fortress that needs to be built from the ground up, so that we have to allow that kind of time for completion. So, okay. So how would we want to map this out then? We have the meeting with the dwarves. We can still have the meeting with the dwarves. The dwarves are new allies, and keep in mind, in some ways, I like better presenting the relationship with the dwarves in a more compressed timeline, because their relationship with the dwarves is still uncertain and shaky. And that's actually easier to convey if they've only recently met them, actually. If that alliance is a new and uncertain thing, then I think that we can certainly have we can convey that really well and quite simply by having this be a new and uncertain alliance. Tony, I agree that Tony is reminding us that Dairon is like an exposition machine just waiting to be used, essentially, because we can have him telling tales and singing songs, right, in order to establish things that have happened in the past. And that is actually kind of cunning, Tony, to be able to do to fill in any time gaps, and also introduce the character of Dairon, right, who's never really been introduced before. So that's I think fine. Hakan, Hakan says I'm slowly talking him around here. He's coming to terms with it. Really, my goal is not to lose any of the story. And here's what I would say about the whole question of the first and second battle. Here's the question I would ask. If Tolkien didn't call them that, why would we care? Right? We care about that sequence because Tolkien calls them the first and second battle, and by golly, we want to make sure that they're in that order because he's called them the first and second battle, and it seems like an arbitrary and strange change to shift that around. But again, step aside from that for a minute. What's important about it? What matters about that as a story? And that's the thing we want to make sure that we preserve, right? I think what matters about that is, for the big picture of the Silmarillion story, the importance of those battles that occur in Beleriand prior to the arrival of the Noldor is the effect that the arrival of the Noldor has. The way in which this sets up the Noldor coming in as deliverers. Or there are a couple different elements to this, right? First, the impression, that misapprehension, well, not apprehension, or that misconstrual, right? That understandable misunderstanding that the Noldor have been sent over by the Valar, right? That the elves of Beleriand are in desperate need of help, and here come the Noldor, and they look like the knights in shining armor, right, riding to their rescue. That's one element of the story that's really important, right? And then of course we have lots of sort of heavy irony about that. At the same time, there's also the justification of the arrogance of many of the Noldor later on, in particular the sons of Feanor, right? Who are going to be able to swagger and say to Thingol things like, when Thingol is starting to say, like, all of this realm I claim for my own, even Fingolfin is going to be like, a king is he who can hold his own, right? I mean, the orcs were ruling in Beleriand when we showed up, so let's not talk about that, right? Let's not be so particular. All of those dynamics are a major element, right? A major consequence of the fact that Beleriand was practically enemy-occupied territory when the Noldor arrived. So, can we capture that? I think it would be important not to lose that. That seems to me a crucial element of the story, and obviously such great potential for playing on that, and for doing a lot with that, both in the relationship with the people of the Sindar to the Noldor, as well as sort of the big picture. Totally, I think we can keep that, right? And I don't think by making those two battles closer together, I don't think we're going to lose anything. By hastening the plot line of the, by compressing it, I don't think we need to lose that either. I don't think, let's see, Hakan, I still don't think the Green Elves need to have arrived earlier. They can arrive late as well. In fact, here's a story projection concept, Hakan, about that. What if we use the Green Elves almost as a kind of a foil for the Noldor, right? That is, we show the Sindar in trouble. They're already threatened. And when they're threatened and finding themselves in need of allies, right, they meet the dwarves, right? And the dwarves look like they might be allies, but they're not sure about the dwarves, right? They have reasons to be uncertain as to whether or not the dwarves are going to be real good allies, right? So what else do they have? Well, they have Círdan at the Havens, right? But they're kind of separated from each other, right? The Sindar and Doriath and Círdan at the Havens, and both of them are kind of focused on trying to defend their territory, right? And then more elves arrive with Ents, right? Elves with Ent reinforcements. So the Green Elves come in, and these are friends, right? These are people who can, or at least should be, friends, especially compared to the dwarves, right? We can be much more confident. We can be much more confident in them. But it doesn't work out, right? The Green Elves get slaughtered, and Denethor dies. Then the Noldor come, right? But the Noldor can come right after that. So do you see what I mean about having the Green Elves be a foil? Like, we get, before the influx of elves from Valinor who come in and change the complexion of the war, in any case, it looks like that's going to happen when the Green Elves come in from the east, right? Except that doesn't really pan out. And it also enables it enables us to show the difference, right? One of those challenges is, how do you show on screen some of those less, less corporeal, less outwardly manifested things. Just like the fact that the difference between the Morroquendi and the Calaquendi, right? And especially in their relationships with the orcs. how can we show that the orcs are no match for the Noldor when the orcs were already slaughtering the green elves, for instance. So there's a lot that we can do there. Yeah, Hakan, see, no, I'm totally willing to make the first battle happen first. I'm not at all insisting that the first battle should happen second. I'm totally willing to do that. I'm just saying we need to compress the timeline. That's the thing that I'm ready to insist on, is that we compress the timeline and we keep it consistent. I don't see any need to ask our viewers to make that chronological leap backwards. It's going to be confusing. It's certainly going to confuse the Angband situation, because remember, as we've been saying, the Angband plot is crucial in season 3, because it is the Angband plot that connects both of them together. The Noldor and the Sindar plots are not really gonna collide. They're gonna come close, right? We're gonna have them in parallel, but they're not gonna meet each other. They might, we're talking about in the final episode having Thingol hear about the Noldor, right? But that's the closest they're gonna get to actually colliding. The common denominator between the two storylines is the Angband plot. And if we mess with the Angband plot, if we go backwards and say, like, okay, so you remember seeing Gothmog rescuing Morgoth, well, this is before that, it's going to be really hard. Okay, so we do the compression. We've got some time for up through the first battle to happen. Now, let me explain, Hakan, the rationale behind my pushing the first battle back later on. And that is simply to allow, since the stories, as I said, essentially the Noldor story and the Sindar story, as they're unfolding in season 3, are unfolding in parallel all the way through. Again, they're not gonna connect. They're not gonna join together into one story until season 4, right? We're not gonna get interactions between them until season 4. The death of Denethor is the big tragedy at the end of that timeline, right? What I didn't want to do, Nick, thinking of what you were suggesting before, what I didn't want to do is abandon the Beleriand again. I didn't want to abandon the Sindar a second time, which there is a serious danger of our doing. If we fire all of our rounds prior to the burning of the ships, right? Whether we do the burning of the ships in 8 or whether we push it back to 9, Hakan, as I know you've suggested, even if we push it back to 9, right? What then? We have the death of Denethor happen before. Then what happens with the Sindar between episode 9 and episode 13? What's left for them to do? Are we just leaving them behind again, like we did in season 2? And I'd rather not do that. That's why my first impulse was to spread out this. If we think of the Sindar story in season 3 as starting with the return of Morgoth and the sort of the ending of the kind of quasi, like, New Cuivianen sort of peaceful, if not Edenic, peaceful at least, existence of the Sindar. At the beginning of the season, that ends, right? And we get rumblings of danger and foretellings of danger by Melian. So we need to seek shelter and a place of strength, right? So we go to Menegroth. We establish relationships with the dwarves, though those are possibly shaky. The danger arrives. The green elves arrive. Battle breaks out. The green elves are slaughtered. Then what? What do we have after that left? Because to me, the battle in which Denethor dies seems like the culmination. That's when things are blackest, right? The green elves have been killed and they've retreated, and Doriath is besieged, right? Doriath is besieged, and the Falas is besieged. That's kind of the end, isn't it, of the Sindar timeline until it joins with the Noldor's timeline in season 4, right? So if we finish that story prior to the second battle, right? Prior to Feanor's landing on the beaches and fighting the orcs, then how are we not just going to be leaving them behind and then spending the entire last 4, 5, 6 episodes on the arrival of the Noldor, the battles in the north, and ultimately the Helcaraxa and the arrival of Fingolfin. I'm not saying that that's not a defensible way to do it. And if we decide that that's how we want to do it, I mean, we can kind of leave Beleriand hanging again, southern Beleriand hanging again, and just come back to them in the beginning of season 4 being like, meanwhile, still besieged, right? But I don't like it. Even if we return to them at the end, right? After it's been 3 or 4 episodes, even if we return to them at the end and have the like messengers coming through, we can have some change, some alteration to the siege. Maybe when the Noldor return, maybe the southern armies pull back as a consequence, right? So the siege is broken, the siege breaks, and they don't know why. And then they hear they've been delivered, right? And so the final message to Thingol is a message of hope. But that's just a visit, right? And we would have left them behind, 4 episodes ago? 5 episodes ago? I mean, maybe we can contrive something. Suggestions. So Hakan and Marie are suggesting we can sort of divide up the siege of Doriath from the attacks on Círdan at the Havens. And we can get Maria suggesting the girdle coming into play, and spiders attacking. We talked about Shelob and the other children of Ungoliant, and what's going to end with the girdle and with them up in Ered Gorgoroth. Right? Yes. We could do that. But here's what I'm not convinced of. I'm not convinced that it... Here's how I want to think about it. Again, I want to think about the Sindar story. The season 3 Sindar story. And I want the shape of that to be a good and an interesting and satisfying shape. I would like it to have a culmination. My favorite culmination is the death of Denethor and the slaughtering of the Green Elves. That the end, not quite the very end, right? But what looks like the end of the story of the elves of Beleriand is going to be in defeat, right? So if we end with the girdle and the spiders, what's the story? Where is the story going? Where does it end? What's the target? What's the purpose of that story? I want to make sure that we get the shape of that story clear. And then I would like to space it out and integrate it with the story of the Noldor appropriately so that works. And they sort of march together and enable us to jump back and forth in ways that are going to be sensible. If we're having the betrayal of Fingolfin and the burning of the ships and the death of Feanor and all that stuff, and we're interspersing that with, meanwhile, siege still going on, right? Or, I don't know. I mean, again, I don't want to belittle it. What I'm trying to say is this is why I wanted to move the main battle and the death of Denethor until later in the season, so that we could just thinking of the Sindar arc. Yeah. So, okay, Tony says it's the story of settling into a siege and resolve to resist, but resigned to probable defeat. Okay. So Tony, you're saying the Sindar story should be, what, fighting the long defeat, shall we say? Right, Celeborn's already there, so I guess we can start fighting the long defeat. I can accept that. That seems to me appropriate. So what are the stages? What are the stages in the slightly shorter defeat, Nick? Exactly. Right. Well, but who knows, right? I mean, who knows how long the defeat might have taken had the Noldor not come. Once the Girdle of Melian went up, what's going to take Morgoth coming against them in person, isn't it? To overcome Doriath with the girdle in place. Yeah. And Tony, exactly. If the arrival of the Noldor, the arrival of the Noldor should look like a eucatastrophe, certainly, to the Sindar. Absolutely, that's just what we want. We want the end of their story to be like the Eagles are coming, right? Except it's the Noldor. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So let's make a list. What are the events? What are the major events in the Sindar storyline? In the order in which we're doing, with this admittedly compressed timeline, what needs to happen? We start off in peace, right? Our last glimpse of the peace of Beleriand. Morgoth has returned, but they don't know it yet, right? Morgoth hasn't done anything outward yet. None of his people have come back, have come out, right? So we start with them in peace. What's the first thing that happens? Meet the dwarves, meet the orcs, build Menegroth, meet the green elves, Marie says. Okay, right. Dwarves, Menegroth, Felbeast. All right, okay, good. So they have to meet the dwarves.
Do we need to plant any character moments?
Oh, yeah. Well, so I think episode 3, the long delayed episode 3, has got to be, one of the primary purposes of episode 3 has to be reintroducing and introducing characters, right? I mean, because these are people like Luthien, wasn't there before, right? We last saw Thingol and Melian, right, as they were emerging from the thicket, right, in which they had been frozen. So we need to introduce Luthien. We need to introduce Dairon. We need to reestablish Beleg and Mablung. It would be great to sort of see Celeborn hanging around again. So there's a lot that needs to be established about the whole Sindar. We need to maybe even recall Círdan and what he's up to. Maybe that doesn't have to happen in episode 3, but that has to happen pretty early. So we need to reestablish. We need to reestablish our characters and to establish what's going on. By the way, Hakan, I really love the way in your projected story, the longer version, not this outline. I really love the prominence of the character of Eol. I want to include Eol a lot more too. I really like a lot of the stuff that you were doing with Eol in your longer outlines. That stuff is great, and especially I love the idea of having Eol be a really important element in the interaction between the elves and the dwarves. Because, see, that's a story that Tolkien tells, right? I mean, he tells us that Eol had this relationship with the dwarves, and he has had, presumably, for a long time. We know that most of the elves don't have a close relationship with the dwarves, right? But Eol, differently among the rest of the elves, pursues that relationship. Well, so yeah, why not have that be a factor in the initial establishment of relations? So having Eol be involved in that, and connecting that with the story of the price that he's going to pay, right? How he gives Anglachel, ultimately Turin's sword. How Eol gives that sword to Thingol for permission to live in Nan Elmoth. That I think is it's really great to integrate that. So to integrate that now, to integrate his relationship with the dwarves. I really like having Eol be not necessarily a central character, but a fairly prominent character, especially early on here. He can kind of vanish in a sense once the fighting starts, right? But yeah, I think having him involved is really cool. Tony thinks maybe he could also fight and be heroic in the early battles. I'm wondering, Tony, I would think that he would stay. Think about the webs and snares that he sets for Arethel eventually in Nan Elmoth, right? It's like he creates a little mini girdle of his own, but of a different quality, right, around Nan Elmoth compared to around the rest of Doriath. It would be interesting to see how he, So yeah, Hakan, I agree that he would hide. Would we make there be? We should make there be a specific moment, though, right, when he withdraws. So maybe he is a more active player earlier on. I'm torn. On the one hand, it would be kind of fun to have Eol just be, sort of a jerk from day one. And we've already met Eol, right? He was involved in the debate back at Cuivienen. And he's like the dude who's always stomping out in a tizzy, right? That's like Eol's job. But anyway, I think it would be cool to see him like maybe fighting alongside the dwarves in an early skirmish, to show like the potential that he could be an important ally, that he could really help, but then have him alienated and withdraw, and so he's not part of the story. Anyway, I don't want to get too involved in details. We'll do that when we actually like get back to discussing the episodes. But okay, so we have the peace, and the peace needs to get broken. Which should happen first, meeting the orcs or meeting the dwarves? That is to say, bigger picture, the question is, do we want them to meet the dwarves after they are already in threat? Like, do they meet the dwarves peacefully and just sort of establish peaceful relationships just because? Or are they already in threat? Have they already seen the orcs and are afraid of what's coming, right? How pointedly, right, are they looking around for allies, right? I think, Tony, I agree. I mean, as I'm sort of talking myself around to here, they can meet.
I like that suggestion.
Yeah. The right, the actively looking for allies when they find the dwarves.
In particular, giving Eol the role. That's Tony's suggestion.
Yeah.
Give Eol the role of bringing the dwarves in specifically for an alliance. So that gives him a more central position and a more active role.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. And then again, gives us a sense of they're losing something when Eol withdraws himself, which I think he's going to do when Thingol claims Anglachel, right? I mean, Eol is not going to be best pleased that he has to give, that sword to Thingol. I think he's going to grudge that, and that's what's going to lead to the falling out. Now Mike says, allies, who in the world are they expecting to find? No, but that's the point, Mike, is that it's not that they're thinking like, okay, we need to ally ourselves with some of the other people of which there are not, but rather they keep having these meetings, right? I mean, if you think about it, there are three stages, right? They're in danger. They meet the dwarves. Hey, look, wow, allies. Okay, maybe not. hey, look, green elves. Okay, now we're really cooking with gas, right? Oh, except we're not. And then the Noldor catastrophe, right? Which of course is also going to turn out to be somewhat ambivalent, right? As allies as well. So, yeah. Rickle is wondering how much time we can give them. Well, first of all, Rickle, I'm not sure they're going to need that much time, because on the one hand, that is Angband, I don't think is going to need that much time, because I do think the story really begins. We'll begin with a kind of background, right? Introduction to characters and stuff. Episode 3 needn't be action packed, right? Necessarily, because we're reintroducing folks. But something does need to happen, and I'm totally. I think that thing that happens should be an encounter with the orcs, right? So, so they right. Oh, good, yeah, Tony, exactly. Thinking about later, they're going to meet men, right? Yeah. So, because that really is, it's one of the trends of things that happens, right? These people that come in and the forming of these alliances is a big deal, right? And then Tony, of course, then you get the betrayal of men right at the near knife and everything. So, okay. All right. So that's clear. Meeting the orcs, there's reestablishment, meeting orcs, is establishing relations, meeting the dwarves, establishing relations with the dwarves. When does Menegroth come in there? With the dwarves? In the context of the dwarves, that was what we originally were talking about. And displacing Meme. And starting Meme on his big grievance. And then what comes next? The arrival of the Green Elves? No. There should be a bigger attack next. Some preliminary skirmishes. Things should start to look grim for the Sindar before the Green Elves come in, because again, the Green Elves can come in as an apparent kind of catastrophe. So yeah, Marie, I'm thinking Bulldog and the orcs here. Not yet Sauron and the spiders. I like the idea that Sauron and the spiders are only ward-offable by the girdle of Melian. There can be, thinking about the Beleriand story as we're telling it now, with the emphasis being not on defeat, which was my first thought, but on resistance under siege, right? If that's the emphasis of the Sindar story, then the logical culmination of the Sindar story is the girdle, right? The raising of the girdle of Melian. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna need a series of. So Bulldog comes down. They should lose. The Green Elves should lose a significant skirmish. And then the Green Elves can come and help, right? So the Green Elves come in, the Ents come in. This looks like that's really going to work out. Then it doesn't. How do we balance who gets credit for appearing to win the battle in the south? Sauron or Bulldog? Or do we even have Bulldog established in rivalry to Sauron? I'm not sure that we do. One of my questions last time was about Bulldog, because I'm still not confident in Bulldog's character. Here's my biggest concern. I like the power struggle between Gothmog and Sauron that we've established. I'm not sure I want to introduce Bulldog as a third figure in that. Especially because I don't see a different position for him to occupy. It kind of sounds like, in some of the suggestions that people have been talking about Bulldog, it sounds like he's being made into basically Gothmog Jr., right? If we had, because, we had Gothmog as the thug, this is sort of brainless thug and the rule by sheer force, and Sauron as the more sort of cunning and subtle, certainly, of the two of them. But it sounds like, so what's Bulldog then? If we could make a genuinely third position for him to occupy in that constellation, I would be okay. But if he's merely like a sort of a surrogate Gothmog, we've already got one of those, and I don't think we need one. Rather than that, I would rather have him just be under Sauron's orders. I would just have him be sort of Sauron's chief thug. Let me see if I can explain this differently. Here's one possible role for Bulldog. One possible role for Bulldog is not as a leader really at all. That is to say, not as somebody who's trying to set up his own power, but somebody who is one of the greatest functions of Bulldog that I can see. Again, big picture, like what's the point of him? What does he accomplish? What he could accomplish is, being the representative of the orcs, essentially. Right? We're not going to get to know any of the orcs personally. But he could be... he is like the face of orcdom, right? He is the one who illustrates the personalities of orcs. He is the one who... I mean, I'm thinking like the role that they play in the mind, or, for the benefit of the viewer, right? I think... So not having him be a rival of anybody, but instead just having him be a soldier, essentially. Yes, he is an orc herder, the shepherd of the goblins, says Mike. Exactly, that's his focus. He's chief orc, and his job is just, he thinks like orcs do, right? He just wants to be like, point him at something he can kill, right? In other words, he's not going to be rivaling. That would make him not the rival of Sauron. And I like that. For, again, one, it simplifies. It maintains the two, just the more simple conflict between Gothmog and Sauron, which, as I recall, when we were originally talking about the episode outline, we were working with that and having the southern front be Sauron and the northern front be Gothmog, which works out nicely because the southern front seems to be going really well, so Sauron seems to be scoring points and Gothmog is losing, but then he gets the benefit, right, of killing Feanor. So, on the one hand, his armies are losing their battles against the Noldor, but at least he did off Feanor, and that's good. I like that. I prefer that. If we interject Bulldog as more of a general, I think he should be a captain, not a general. I think he should be. I think that he can be just under Sauron's command. I would want him in the south instead of in the north, because it's going to be through the Sindar plotline that we're going to be introducing orcs, right? By the time the Noldor arrive in Beleriand, and we get the death of, the Battle of Feanor and the death of Feanor, to the viewers, orcs will already be an established concept. It's the southern frontier and the Sindar story that is going to be establishing orcs as characters and as a concept. Therefore, Bulldog, as, the face of orcdom, should be in the south so that we can meet him there. And he would be therefore under, he should be there, therefore under Sauron's command. Mike says he should be movie Bolg rather than movie Azog. Yes, I think, though, Mike, I'm laughing just because, like, movie Bolg changed so much, right, that I don't even, like, remember for sure who movie Bolg is anymore. But anyway. Uh, so... So how do we want the progress of the war in the South to go then? If we have Bulldog come down leading a troop of orcs, right? And they defeat a bunch of the Sindar and then the Green Elves arrive. So again, it looks like, hey, it's like we get an abortive eucatastrophe moment. So it looks like this is going to be a great thing. Then what? Then we have Denethor killed, right? Then we have a bigger battle. Bulldog comes back with reinforcements and destroys the Green Elves. Concerning which, by the way, we're gonna have to take out a few Ents too, aren't we? It's kind of gonna have to happen. That's gonna be sad. It's gonna be really tragic. I love it. Okay, that's a great tragic moment there. Okay, so this is going to be the high water mark for the orcs. So then what's next? What's next in our progression of events? How do the spiders come in? When do the spiders come in? You see, this is the beginning of the quarrel of the elves with the orcs, right? Burarum. I love the opportunity to establish, like, to pave the way for references that we can make like 20 years down the road. So, to have moments in the battle with the Green Elves here, the Ents and the Orcs' first battle, which we can then sort of allude to in how the battles work out, both at Helm's Deep and at Isengard. That'll be fun. When does the girdle come up? Does the girdle come up now? So the Green Elves have been destroyed. Does she put up the girdle? And so Marie's suggesting that he enlists the spiders, seeing that orcs aren't going to be able to get through the girdle. He tries to bring in bigger guns, right? Okay. But if we do that, then when does that? Then that puts the girdle happening pretty early on. Again, I'm worried about not leaving anything for the end, right? Are we going to be building towards a climactic moment? We could have. I mean, I like the idea of the raising of the girdle coming. That should be a turning. It should look like it's all over, right? In fact, we could even show Sauron's tactical skill, right? Tony, I was thinking along the same lines that you were just suggesting here, Sauron attacking on multiple fronts. We can have Sauron deploying the orcs so that he divides up the enemy, right? Because there are three enemies. There's Círdan and the elves at the Havens. There's Thingol and the elves in Doriath, and there's the new green elves that have arrived, right? So tactically, Sauron divides them up. Oh, Wally disapproves of this theory. Oh, man.
Yes, he does.
Okay.
No, I think he agrees. That's just basically the only noise that he expresses these days.
Yeah.
The girdle raising to me seems like I agree that should be coming sort of almost in a moment of like that should be almost like a form of surrender.
Right.
Certainly a surrender of the rest of the continent, right?
Yeah. Yes.
An admission that we can't hold Beleriand in general. Um, we need to withdraw and protect ourselves. We're going to leave everybody else to their own devices.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a pretty serious move, because they're, by putting up the girdle, they're defending themselves, but they're practically abandoning Círdan and the Havens, leaving them to fend for themselves. They may be under the impression that the Green Elves have been totally wiped out. They might be relieved to discover later on that not all of the Green Elves have died.
It should definitely be at least partially in response to the slaughter of the Green Elves.
Yeah, definitely. How do the spiders fit in? So do the spiders then come in as Sauron's attempt at an anti-girdle initiative, which will fail?
Does he legitimately think it will work?
I don't know.
Is it more of a, fine, you want to shut yourselves in there and keep me out, but I'm going to make it impossible for you to leave?
Right.
Is it sort of a siege? I would say I'm leaning more towards that angle of sort of a spiteful siege. Like, sort of, he recognizes he can't get through, but he'll be damned if he's going to leave them at peace.
Yes.
He's going to make sure that they want to lock themselves in and they're never leaving again.
Yes. I would. It doesn't leave much for Shelob and the spiders to do, right? Like, I'm gonna recruit these like super intimidating and scary looking creatures, and then just have them kind of sit here and kind of wait and not do anything. Seems a little anticlimactic.
I suppose they could be involved. They could be involved in some of the earlier battles, and then he redeploys them to besiege Girdle.
Yeah, I would kind of. I would like them to be more involved. I would like them to. I would like to see sort of the spiders kind of come in.
So would Wally.
Yeah, I guess Wally approves. The spiders come in as like Sauron's masterstroke that nobody was expecting, right? Yeah, because especially if he tries to bring them in as an anti-girdle weapon and they fail, then that just kind of makes them look pointless and weak, and we wouldn't want that. What if he brings them? What if that's part of the tactical deployment, right? So that he deploys Bulldog and the orcs, and he deploys the spiders. Against whom? I think that we have to have Bulldog and the orcs fighting the Green Elves and the Ents, because we want to establish the Ent, the Ent orc antagonism, right? In which case, do we get the spiders attacking the Havens? What if it's spiders and werewolves? We need werewolves too. We need Draugluin and his brood, right? So we have an army of spiders and werewolves driving the elves of the Havens. Okay, Tony, you and I we're on the same wavelength here, Tony. Tony was thinking the same thing of werewolves attacking the Havens. Yeah. Marie is thinking the werewolves attack the Havens and the spiders attack Doriath. So, Marie, the spiders are successfully invading Doriath and get repelled by Melian. Melian drives them out and establishes the girdle, and we see the spiders being driven away as the girdle sort of emerges. Yeah. That could be really cool, actually. Right? If we showed Doriath in that case would then be like a sort of precursor or anticipation of Mirkwood, right? That is, the spiders actually come in and we see Menegroth is like surrounded by spiders, right? So Menegroth is besieged and we see the forest is beginning to become corrupted, and we've got, the webs all over the place. And Melian, she has to sing the girdle into being, right? I mean, there's that there can't be any two ways about that. So Melian, what does she like? Come out and sing, and I don't know how visually how we would do that, light or something, but and this sort of just like this ring would just have to spread out from her, and have the spiders flee before it, and then and drive them away. I don't know how to visualize it, Marie, but I'm thinking of the visualization of the stable girdle doesn't have to be the same as the visualization of the making of the girdle. But that's a really dramatic moment, right? Obviously, if we have Melian do that. You know what that kind of makes me think of, Dave? It reminds me of what a bad job Jackson did with movie Galadriel in The Hobbit. You know, and
let's make sure we have a scene just like that.
Yeah, exactly. No, my thought is, you know, Melian coming out and standing against Shelob and the spiders is like Galadriel as she should have been, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah. This is us doing it right. Yeah. Yes, good. Yeah, Zachary, I agree. Like as the girdle spreads out for, you know, as this ring of light, it has to be light, right? Sort of moves out from her. Yes, the look of the forest would change. We would see the webs breaking and the sort of incipient corruption of the forest being healed. Yeah. I love Haakon's response. He says, "Wait, did Peter Jackson make a Hobbit movie?" Yeah. That's a perfect response, Haakon. I'm kind of getting myself there. In fact, Haakon, I'm going one step further. I find in my own mind, not only am I, as time goes on, trying to forget more and more about the Peter Jackson Hobbit film, but I'm more and more convincing myself in retrospect that all of our wonderful plans about the Hobbit film from Riddles in the Dark actually happened. So I'm trying to replace my memories of the actual Hobbit movies with the really good Hobbit movies that we planned, and so soon I will convince myself that that's what really happened. But anyway, yeah, okay, I like this. That's the sort of the dramatic high point. It brings Shelob in and shows the real that really puts the spiders in a great place as far as being a threat, right? And the fact that they are the ones who are moving into the central location, that they're the ones actually threatening and looking like they could break into Menegroth itself, that shows them as, you know, arguably the most powerful of the three forces. And Haakon, I really liked your suggestion that you were making about the elves of the Falas being driven out into their ships, right? So that their cities are overrun by the werewolves, and they have to, and they're sort of, you know, standing off on their ships, and that's the only thing that saves them. Yeah, good. And yes, Nick, it does set up the Luthien Sauron contest later on. Yes. In fact, Nick, of course, we can have this song in here, I'm thinking about Philip Menzies and our other composers. The song that Melian sings is going to be an important one, right? Because it has to be not identical to, but similar to the songs of power that Luthien sings later on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. All right. I love this outline. But then, of course, we end. So it looks like, so it ends with sort of a positive, but at the same time, it's not a positive, right? You know, we can emphasize that, you know, the fact that, okay, right. So Melian is, you know, exerted her power, and Doriath has been saved, but the Green Elves weren't saved. The Falas hasn't been saved, and now they're besieged, and so we can see the spiders on the northern borders. We can see the orcs patrolling around. We can have a troop of orcs coming in and setting fire to the Falas. We can, you know, things are still really bad. Yeah. No, yes, Nick, I think you're right. We do need to be, as we're moving forward, we need to be thinking of an campy way to sort of talk about werewolves and make, because there are a lot of assumptions people are going to bring about werewolves. So yeah, we need to establish this is not like infectious lycanthropy with the werewolves, because you're right, that's something we can't assume everybody's going to know. Yeah, we do need to make sure that it's clear what the werewolves are. Yeah. Okay, so we still have the Southern Front at the end of the day being a victory for Sauron. He can't culminate his victory, right? He can't come through, he can't kill Thingol and Melian, he can't destroy Doriath, but he's got everything else under control, right? So he can call it a win. Mike asks if we should have Luthien assist or accompany the girdle. Well, we'll come back to that. We'll get to these episodes in details. I don't want to get too caught up in the intimate details of all these things. Question: where in the Noldor timeline does the girdle happen? What episode do we want the girdle to come up in? Because it's going to be pretty late, right? And if we want the Sindar story to not be peaking too soon, if we want it to go all the way through season 3, then it needs to be towards the end. Do we parallel it with the rising of the moon and the arrival of Fingolfin in episode 12? Yeah, it would have to be around the time of the Noldor victories, Nick. I agree. Could be after the death of Feanor, though. Let's see. So Nick wants Sauron in Angband again by the time of the parley, right? So he's coming back and he's, coming back and bragging about his victories, right? When they have the parley with the Noldor. Okay. Yeah, because all that's left after the girdle comes out, we're done with the Sindar story, except them hearing about the Noldor coming in. How do they hear it? Who tells them? Hey, we put Círdan on a boat, didn't we? We can move him around.
That's true. He's incredibly portable.
He is. He is the most mobile member of our cast from southern Beleriand here. He could sail, or at least send some of his ships sailing north, on reconnaissance. He will have noticed, mind, this is a great place to establish the fact that the servants of Morgoth are very leery of the sea, right? So, yeah, so he could go north. We have Círdan witness the burning of the ships. Or maybe he just comes across the wrecks of the ships. So, I'm kind of thinking he sees the light from the burning of the ships. Yeah. We could always just send one of the Sindar, like Beleg or Mablung, to the north, and they could bring back the tidings. But my problem is why? Why would they go? They don't have any reason to know that anything is happening in the north. Yeah. Okay, so Marie, he would see the light, and then he would come up and he would, as Marie says, he would find the ship graveyard, right? That would be a heartbreaking scene, right? Because surely Círdan would recognize, remember, he was always, the two of them parted late at the end, right? What if he recognizes Olwe's ship? or something, has some kind of intuition that this is, the ships of Olwe, the ships of his people, and they're destroyed. He wouldn't know how it happened, right? He certainly wouldn't know that the Noldor set fire to them themselves. He would think that some great battle was happening in the north, and he'd be right. Yeah. That's true. Nick points out that they could actually get the information by Beleg and Mabung could get information about what's going on in the north by interrogating a captured orc. But even there, Nick, for tidings to have gotten that far into the south by foot, even among the orcs, news would have had to travel pretty fast. Because, I mean, if the raising of the girdle is happening at the same time as I'm mindful of, I forget who it was who was saying earlier, we can't exactly have them, casting around for allies, right? Because they don't know that there's, and they have no reason to think that there's, they have no reason to think that there are allies in the north. Why would they suspect that, right? Yeah. Brianna's recalling Tuor's foster dad, Anael from Mithrim. Yeah, I love bringing him in as a character. I'd love to establish him so that when he becomes Tuor's foster dad, he's already an established character with us. I love giving him a role, but I don't think is he going to be in Mithrim yet? I don't know. I don't know that we want there to be elves in Mithrim. I think he's going to move there later, probably. Yeah, I agree, Sharon. It does seem to be more pathos in sort of the northern, the great events in the north coming in through the eyes of Círdan. And especially, the thing that I really like about that most is all of the opportunities for misinterpretation, right? That is for misunderstanding the situation. Because there's going to be lots of misunderstanding between the Sindar and the Noldor. They're going to assume. They've got to assume. They've got to assume that the ships were burned by orcs, right? I mean, his own city has just been burned, right? So he's gotta assume that he's never going to guess the kinslaying and then the burning of the ships, right? That's going to be so far off Círdan's, personal experience, and what he would never suspect either one of those two things. So if he sees the light and then comes across the burned hulls of the ships, he's got to assume that was orc work. And yes, Nick, the logical conclusion is that Olwe tried to return to help them and failed. That does seem very plausible, right? And I mean, that does seem to be exactly what he would probably assume. And so he could think that the tragedy is even bigger than it is. And then and then the Noldor are there, right? And that can seem like a sort of a miraculous turn. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, Brianna, let me explain a little bit more. Here's the reason I'm hesitant to have there be grey elves living in Mithrim already. Because if there are, we've got to do something with them in the northern front. That is, why aren't they being pounded on by Morgoth already? Right? Why isn't Gothmog using them for target practice? And do we want to even go there? I don't think we do. I mean, I think for the sake of the streamlining and simplicity of our storyline, we need to have Sindar in the south, Noldor in the north. At the beginning, that like the northern front and the northern storyline is all about the Noldor, right? And Círdan kind of viewing it from a distance. And then the southern is all about the Sindar and Thingol. If we have some of the Sindar living up there, then we've got to have them kicked out. I mean, we could do that, I suppose. That could be, one of the earliest things that happens in like episode 3 or 4 is that like refugees from the north come down, and that's how they learn about the orcs in the first place. We could do something like that, but that seems to me a little bit much, I think. So Marie, great question. Do the Sindar know about Morgoth's return, and when do they figure that out? I think they figure that out. First of all, I think Melian knows. I think Melian tells them. Think of Melian's talk about her, like, Morgoth trying to, the thing that Galadriel is repeating when she talks about repelling the mind of Sauron. I think that Melian is going to be aware. Melian tells them. And Marie, I'm thinking the context for that should be when they encounter the orcs for the first time and they come back and they're bewildered and confused and they're like, what does this mean? What is going on? In response to that, Melian says, it means that Morgoth has returned and evil has come to Beleriand, right? Boom. So yeah, I think she's got to know. She's got to be aware of the fact that Morgoth is back. And that can be how they find out. So I don't think we need a northern Sindar front. I would rather just keep it clean and lose the Grey Elves of Mithrim. We can have them... We can establish them later. We got season 4 for that, right? Don't forget, we had a whole like half season at least of, the whole first half of season 4 is going to be a dramatic adaptation of Beleriand and its realms, right? So we got lots of time to establish a gray elf presence up in the north. Yeah. Of course, you're right, Mike. Melkor, not Morgoth. It's they're not going to know the name Morgoth until they learn it from the Noldor. Very true. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. It's good. I think that works. Okay, we'll have to. We still haven't fully mapped that out. Okay, so for next time we're totally going to talk about episode 3. That is absolutely going to happen next time. But I feel much better. I hope you guys feel better. I hope that we can all. I'm happy now. I have because this is what I was lacking. What I was lacking is the plot line. I did not have the plot arc of the Sindar clear in my mind. There's one way though in which I am not happy yet, and this is your job before next time, which means next week, by the way, because we're returning to the regular schedule. So our next episode will be next week on the 20th. I want a list. I want an episode list, a revised episode outline list that includes this new stuff that we've been working out here today with the South Beleriand plot line. And integrates it with the major plot lines of the Noldor, which are clearer, which are simpler, right? There's little that needs to be done in sort of manufacturing the plot line of the northern front. So that's what needs to happen. So I want a new outline that we can look at the beginning of next time and admire, and then I will be happy and peaceful in my mind, knowing where we're going, and then I will be ready to proceed forward through episodes through the end of the season, knowing that we have a plan and that I'm confident in it. Okay. That is the plan. That's your assignment for next time. We don't have much time, so I'm going to leave that with as your only assignment for next time. Make a new outline like this.
More than enough work
for next time. So very good. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. And then, so a lot of episode 3, a lot of our discussion next time is going to be focused on sort of the mood, right? It's like introducing Doriath and introducing our characters. So we're gonna spend a lot of time next time talking about that. We of course need some events, but I'm less worried about events than I am in thinking about the characters and the story and the culture and all that stuff. So we'll discuss that next time as we do. As we move into episode 3. And I really mean it. We are so going to plan episode 3 next time. It's absolutely going to happen. Okay, very good. Thanks everybody. So before we go, I want to do our drawings, our prize drawings, to thank everybody who has been donating. That's been awesome. So I'm going to I've got my dice over here. I'm going to roll my dice. So our second prize here. So the Tolkien book of your choice with custom bookplate from me goes to, let's see, goes to Rickle Richards. Congratulations. So you have won Tolkien book of your choice, and the first prize, the choice of 2 books, or like one bigger and more expensive book, up to you, goes to Lance Crimmins. Excellent. Whose donation just came in during class. That was awesome. Very good. Thank you guys so much. Thanks to everybody who has donated. And don't forget, we have our Webathon tomorrow starting at noon. So come to twitch.tv/SignumU starting tomorrow at noon. It's going to be an awesome day. Just to remind you of the times of those big sessions that are happening. I'm doing the Tom Bombadil class starting at noon. I'm doing the Star Trek class starting at 4:20. We're doing our spotlight on the SilmFilm project at 7:10, and then I'm doing the State of the University address at 9, followed immediately afterwards by my taking Wigand to Isengard Lotro stream after that at about 10:30 p.m. Eastern or so. All right, thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you guys next week. See you, Dave and Wally.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening, and Godspeed.
I guess we'll talk to you tomorrow.
That's true. Yes, we will see everybody tomorrow, and then in a week. So lots of contact here.
I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
We can apparently we need to explain exactly what Silmarillion Film Project is.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of people, I think, who don't get it, and they should, because it's awesome. But anyway, okay. All right, so thanks very much, everybody, and I will see you guys later. Thanks for listening, and Godspeed.